All right, another episode of the Stric. Today, we're here with Mark and Blake of the Istrico Production team.
Happy to be with you, Bree.
Hey Bree, what's up?
This episode's going to be a little more visual. So if you're watching this on Spotify or YouTube, that's great. You'll be able to see it. Otherwise, we'll do our best to explain a couple. I think we have 5 scenes total, but we might go beyond that, of different layouts, and so adapting to spaces. So I'm very excited to dive in. Hello. How many times do you get to actually see the space before you dive in on an actual production day?
Yeah, I think more times than not, we usually do have the privilege of seeing the space before we actually go there and start setting up to shoot, whether it be the client sending us over some photos of the space that we're going to be in, if it's a long distance shoot, or if it's local enough. We're usually lucky enough that one of our people on our team can go there and kind of do like a little scouting report of the whole area. And that really allows us to see what space would be best in a client's office or their home, whatever it may be, to really bring their story to life.
Yeah, ideally, it would be always nice to have a day just for a site visit to check the space out, check how big the surrounding is, if there's like problems that we're going to encounter along the way. And that way we could also plan gear-wise what to bring and what we shouldn't bring.
And sometimes it's really like the everyday problems that you don't think of. How many outlets might be in a certain space? How much room are we going to have? How many lights can we bring? These are all just questions that we try to address in the pre-production process. That way we're not on the day of scrambling around wondering what to do.
Yeah, so like speaking though of being able to plan ahead, a lot of the clients, I feel like you probably have to convince them the importance of that. They'll be like, oh, we'll just figure it out on the day of, not realizing how much more you could plan. And so I think like a really good example, a really interesting example is the MCC shoot that you guys did. This shot is just so fun. So basically the wide is a woman in a chair. You can see the whole room, and in the distance is a projector running a footage. And the close-up is a moving camera, like slight soft movement that still also frames the projection in the background. So can you tell me a little bit about how that was decided? It's something like I really haven't seen that often at all.
Yeah, this project specifically was well planned. It was a series of shoot throughout a span of 6 months, I guess. So there was a lot of time of planning, which was very beneficial for us too. One of the idea of filming this is to show the space, and we were thinking of all the interviews has to have an extreme wide shot. And prior to that, there's an event that Blake covered where there's a huge space and there's a projector screen, and we thought of like maybe we could use that projector screen to project some of the previous footage and also some of the old archival stuff. So that works out well. So we kind of like really utilize that space in a very efficient and also very beautiful framed interview.
And of course, sometimes it's just a little bit of movie magic of getting lucky. There are certain times in these interviews where people are talking about certain events or memories that they may have of the community center, and it just so happens that a certain image is playing behind them at that exact time. So sometimes you just get really lucky too when you've pre-planned out as much as we did for these.
Yeah, and on setup wise, it was pretty nice because we had a lot of space, but there are a lot of challenges along the way too. Since we have the projector on the background of that, we can't really run lines of the HDMI of the picture that we're going to be projecting onto the screen. So we had to find a way to wirelessly transmit the recorded footage towards that. So we hid one of the wireless HDMI onto our laptops, and also since it's a wide shot, we can't really show the shotgun microphones on top. So we had to find a way to lav and also put the boom mic high enough so it won't hit the screens.
Then the opposite of that is an outdoor shot. Any outdoor shot, no matter what, is going to come with its own set of challenges. So where did you start with this scene?
I mean, we of course try to plan for it as much as we can. There's apps where you can see sort of when the sunlight's going to set, where is it set at a certain location that you may be at. When we first showed up on scene, we decided that we'd go with a more wide shot of the subject for this interview. And we also went ahead and threw up our own light to kind of mimic the sun. That way we weren't relying on the sun itself. The sun was obviously providing much needed natural light that we use to our benefit, but that was one way that we can kind of cheat nature, you could say. It kind of takes away that stress of, oh my gosh, let's hurry up and get this super fast, chop, chop, chop. And we can kind of relax and do a typical interview and take the time we need like we like to.
The challenge of filming outdoors is always the sunlight, and sometimes when you're filming outdoors, it's easier to frame a medium shot or a close-up shot, but it's always harder to film a wider shot because the idea is to block off the sun or diffuse the sun or redirect the angle of the light where it's coming from. But if you're trying to do that on a wide shot, it's harder because you're going to have a bigger sources of blocking the light, or a screen or a diffuser, and which creates the shadows on a wide shot. So we thought of this shot to have a fixed sunlight, something that won't move all throughout the interview.
Speaking of reflections, this subject is also in glasses. Are there tricks to that? Are there tips?
Yeah, for reflections, we would normally try to avoid the direction of where the camera is pointing towards. So whatever it's pointed towards against, we would try to either increase the height of where the light source is or try to put it on the other side. And also we would try to use some polarizers to try to like clear off some of the glare.
Our philosophy here at Istrico is really we want to do the work on our end to minimize a glare in someone's glasses or anything. There are some people that may just prefer for a person to take off their glasses, but we really want our subjects to be comfortable on camera. And with all the lights and cameras set up, it's sometimes hard enough for people to get truly comfortable and speak like they would if no one was there. So we try to always just go with the flow. If someone has glasses and they're creating a glare, it's okay. We can fix it on our end. And sometimes, we have at our disposal polarizers that we'll throw on top of our lenses, and that really reduces the glare. So there's always ways around getting the perfect shot without making someone have to take off their glasses.
Well, we can move on. Another subject with glasses. So this shoot looks like it was from 4-H and was indoors. And this is a great example of light as art. Like the lighting's in the frame. Was that talked about with the client?
Yeah, for this particular shoot with 4-H, we had a lot of back and forth with them, so much so that we even showed up here a day early for an extra day of pre-production, getting lights set up in the exact spots that we knew we wanted them. That way, when 4-H showed up the next day, we were ready to rock and roll. They came in and we could start doing the interviews almost immediately, which is a benefit, I would say, a privilege than most shoots that we have.
Yeah, so for these shoot, there's like a couple of different challenges that we'd encountered. One is that the subject has to be looking at the camera on one angle. The second angle has to be looking beyond. So they are both two different angles, but they have to feel the same. And yeah, so what we created was a key light on a boom arm. So it's dangled in front of the subject. And then we were having a lot of shadows underneath the jawline. So we added a bounce light, a eyeliner underneath the subject. So that created a good sense of exposure, a controlled exposure where we were able to separate the exposure of the background. So on the background, we tossed in some accent light. We knew we're gonna be having some streaks of light throughout the backdrop. So that could potentially increase the exposure of the subject. So in a controlled situation like this, we had perfect control of the exposure of the subject and also the exposure of the background. So that worked out well for us.
And then another thing with this 4-H shoot is that our team had to be split up during the production day. Me and Nora were in here filming interviews with the subjects, and as they were done with their interviews in here, they would then go with Mark outside, kind of run and gun style, which really kind of complicated things a little bit, which really helped to have that extra day of pre-production to get everything dialed in.
I remember one of their taglines is beyond ready. So it's always like the video always has to be dynamic, moving forward kind of thing. So when we were plotting the after scenes, it has to match the energy from the studio ones. It can't be like static. It can't be like low energy. It was good because that day was good kind of sun.
Do you write down the settings of certain shots that would help you reset or go back, or is it more just like seeing what looks right in the moment?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we'll definitely write down our settings. Like that day, I think the day before, we had written everything down, and that way the next day we know exactly where we're at. Other times it might just be me and Mark communicating with each other via text, or even just shouting across the room to one another, being like, hey, what's your white balance at? We just want to make sure that we're in sync throughout the day. That way we're not really looking at a headache or more problem solving in post-production later on.
It's not a quiz per se, but I was just gonna kind of do like a bit of a lightning round of lightning terms because we have dropped a couple throughout this. So, first let's start with this shot in the theater. Bokeh lighting. What is bokeh?
Yeah, so bokeh is really involves lens flares with your lenses, and each lens kind of will create a different bokeh, and all that really means is you'll get these kind of cool little circular shapes that will appear when you're getting these lens flares, and each lens really has its own unique feel. So here at Istrico, we have many different lenses, and that all just kind of comes into our decision making of, hey, what lens do we want to use in this scenario, especially if we're assuming we're going to be catching some sun flares.
Great. Okay. We kind of covered it, but hairline.
So hair light is when we put a light that accentuates the edges of the subject, especially the hair, so it adds a little bit of a separation of the subject towards the background.
Perfect. The what is accent lighting?
Yeah, accent lighting is an extra light we throw in sometimes on the background, most of the times on the background. Like this green light is an accent light. This blue light right here is an accent light. So it creates an interesting way of setting the mood of your space. One good example of what we did was this scene in MCC where the subject is on a theater. So we thought of like throwing in two spotlights behind the subject to kind of like mimic some stage lights. And one of the interesting angle was with Blake too.
Yeah, on our B cam, we had decided to use a prop that we had brought along, which was pretty much this makeup mirror, and we decided to use those bulbs of the lights on the side of the makeup mirror right in front of that camera lens, and it created just a really cool effect, almost mimicking what you would think stage lights would look like in MCC's theater. So those were awesome to get to create.
And we kind of had to like improvise on how we put that.
Yes, we did. Yeah, and even more interesting enough, I think we had to balance that vanity mirror on top of one of our Pelican cases. Just not enough hands on set quite enough. So that day was a little bit interesting, but anything for a good shot.
And then my last question is this other girl in the theater, there's a green glow. Was that you guys as well?
Yeah, that scene was interesting because when we had the subject sitting on the benches, she was already like standing out. And me and Blake thought of like throwing in two more spotlights going towards the direction of the camera to create a little bit of a flare. It looks good, but we added green on it, which really created this fabulous glow.
Yeah. Definitely added a pop of color to what otherwise would have been fun, but like Mark said, just adding in those accent lights really took the setting that we had her in to the next level. And also a lot of micro adjustments, if I remember correctly, on this shoot. Me and Mark moving light stands inch by inch and going back and checking the monitors just to make sure everything looks right. But again, that's just sometimes what's needed to make sure that you're dialing in lighting to be exactly how you want it to be.
That's so awesome. And yeah, I think on set, people can get stressed. You're worried about the schedule. You're worried about timing of the day, but all those little micro adjustments like live on in this shot now forever. Like this is you can only do so much in editing, and this is just such a great effect. And I think it's almost always worth taking that extra moment, that deep breath, running back and forth one more time, and getting it right.
Yeah, I think it's always just worth it to slow down on the day of and make sure you get everything correctly. Also, just because it saves you an earful of an editor yelling at you in the post-production process because of all the mistakes you may have made on the day of from being a little bit lazy.
This was amazing. I really, really loved this. I could talk about these shots all day. So thank you guys so much for walking us through it. And we should definitely do this again when you have like 5 more new shots to talk about. And yeah, I so appreciate your guys' like creativity and making Istrico make good stuff.
Thanks for having us on, Bree.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Stric. If you have any thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Comment here, on Instagram, or LinkedIn. This is a podcast from Istrico Productions. We'll see you all in 2 weeks.